So are you like James Cameron, who shoots movies underwater because he enjoys doing something that no one else has done and he just enjoys it? It's hard.
For me, I think GRC is at this crossroads.
So all of the complaints you want to, and sticks and stones you want to throw, fine. It was done well in some cases. It was done poorly in other cases. And a lot of people were, jaded by those poor experiences. Anyways, we can all clean it up and make it a Cinderella story and make it better.
When you work in security, you're securing something, right? What is that thing, right? Instead of starting with like, let's try to become pen tester, let's learn Wireshark or like Burp Suite or something like this. I was like, okay, what are the backbones of like an information system?
Ayoub, thanks so much for being here to talk about breaking into cybersecurity, elevating GRC, how to get technical. We're meeting live for the first time after I've been commenting on your YouTube videos. I'm quite excited to have this live experience from across the pond. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Thank you very much for having me. And yeah, looking forward to the conversation.
So I saw your LinkedIn Learning course, GRC for the Cloud Native Revolution. Wow, what a great name, man. I mean, very aligned to my interest of elevating GRC, getting technical. And then I saw your first quiz question. It was like, where should you invest in learning as a GRC practitioner? 1, ISO auditing techniques. 2, keeping up with legislation. Or 3, learning about software delivery and cloud innovation. And it's just like, yes, I found, someone that gets it, right? The most important thing is to understand the underlying technology if you want to be able to secure that technology. Everything else is secondary and less interesting. It's important, but you're really cutting to the heart of the matter. So thank you for that elevation of GRC. And to start off here, could you just introduce yourself a bit? I have checked out your excellent origin story on your channel, but if you could just give a quick thumbnail sketch of someone's meeting you for the first time here, and maybe the catalyst of what led to that LinkedIn course.
Yeah, definitely. So I've been working in security for about 5 years. I'm kind of a career changer, just the case that I didn't start my career anywhere else, but my schooling was going in different directions. So I was first wanted to be an economist. Then I changed into linguistics. I wanted to become an English teacher at university. And then especially related to some of my friends and the fact that I was always interested in technology, but maybe I didn't get the best kind of orientation growing up in terms of where to find areas to pursue my passion. I ended up switching into security just before starting my career. So I only worked in security. I mostly worked in kind of consulting firms when I was in France. And
Big
then
one.
I moved to the UK. Yeah, I worked at Devo Team, which is kind of French one, but pretty well known in Europe, and then EY Big Four for about a year.
I've worked with all the big four. Yep, a lot of respect for what you did there.
Yeah, it comes with its challenges, let's say. And then I moved to the UK, worked for a very small security startup, built the ISO program. It was a very, very good learning experience. And then I work at Salesforce, completely different landscape, massive. The GRC team was over 200 people, so very different scale. And then GitLab is like just in between, not too big, not too small. It's the perfect mix.
So many.
Yeah.
Sorry, there are so many hooks there for me to find this guy in Europe with similar interests. It's like the first thing was, linguistics and economics background. It's like, what, on a GRC engineering podcast? Oh yeah, and I got my technical acumen up to scratch before and after work. Yes, like this guy, he's found something interesting. He's self-propelled to go for it. I've done 8 years of night school, and that was before certs. But it's just like you find a calling, you move towards it, and then you try to advance it. Also, Salesforce. I mean, I've talked about how in IT auditing, nobody really wanted to do it, and so it was kind of looked down upon because it came out of mainframes of financial institutions and basements of companies. And then so I started doing IT audit, and I thought, well, yeah, I'll check out Salesforce because I want to be close to sales. And then I found like a GRC team's 200 people. I didn't know that, but I did know, or I learned, like that Dreamforce conference is the biggest conference in the world for software. And it's like Barack Obama, Tim Cook, and Lars, the drummer from Metallica, are a keynote. I just thought like, whoa, I think I've identified, a path that is unseen. which
Mhm.
is this idea that when you depend on technology more, when you move technology at scale into the cloud and in modern businesses like Salesforce, it's pretty fascinating subject matter and work. And then so it's just I think you're ahead of the curve, and I'm wondering how together we could advance that mission. And actually, and so like, sorry, I interjected a little bit there. I wanted to know what the catalyst was in that journey to get to your LinkedIn course. So could you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think so. I do watch a lot of courses, right? As like a consumer,
Of course you do.
and and the fact was like, for example, I have an O'Reilly subscription, so I do like check the books with that's on there as well. But there's not a lot of offering around GRC. So then when it came time, so they were looking for instructors. Then they kind of reached out and said like, if you're interested in a specific topic, and had to bring the topic, right? I was like, for me, I think GRC is at this crossroads where it came out of like, SOX, a lot of these kind of
Yes.
related program of Enron, etc.
Yep.
And then it kind of deviated from its original purpose. It became more security related. So we have GRC teams specifically for security. But then at the same time, there's this massive shift in how people like build companies, consume software. Everything is changing so much. But ISO was still using back then the 2013 version, let's say. All right, you have so many of the way we do GRC that are based on concepts from the 80s and the 90s, and also
On-prem.
concepts directly pulled from kind of the financial auditing practice that will pull into IT audit and then into GRC. So I was like, something that really helps GRC practitioners learn the basics to do their jobs in the cloud, I think would give them like, it's like career insurance, right? I think if you have these tools and these skills in your tool belt, I think it's way easier for you then to audit an environment you've never seen before, but also work for a company that is a bit more like, scale up style, very fast, fully cloud native. Then you're less like, I want to say threatened, but at least you're less scared about like applying your existing skill set in that environment.
Absolutely. Man, a lot resonates there. And I think I want to talk shop with you a little bit. And it might be today, it might be another time, but as things evolve, and it did come from Sarbanes-Oxley when we needed trust and liquidity in capital markets, and that was the top boardroom issue. 20 years later, cyber risk catapulting to the top of boardroom issues is an existential risk for businesses. And so you've had people in like the defense industrial base come on your podcast, right, with their
Yeah,
FedRAMP FISMA type
yeah.
orientation. And they say, yeah, SOX is too much spreadsheets and we need to elevate and automate and modernize. It's like, I get it. And then, and I do like the NIST CSF. I love NIST CSF in terms of controls left and right of boom. And I think that's talked about more and that's good. But I think a missing piece here is, and a good thing about the Sarbanes-Oxley approach, like, is providing assurance over a period of time. So all of the complaints you want to, and sticks and stones you want to throw, fine. It was done well in some cases. It was done poorly in other cases, and a lot of people were, jaded by those poor experiences. Anyways, we can all clean it up and make it a Cinderella story, and make it better. But I just think one conversation that I wonder your thoughts on that is good about SOX is, yeah, I'm not going to point in time look at you and certify you for the next 3 years. I'm going to say all I can do as an auditor or a person providing assurance is inspect a past period, and I'm going to look at 12 months and randomly inspect some samples and or continuously monitor 12 months or whatever. But the point is, it's not just kids, did you clean your room and then it's gone. So I think all of them. I guess my key point here is that all of them have pros and cons, and I don't think many are advancing what I just mentioned about SOC 2 and SOX. And what are your thoughts on that as an opportunity or a risk or anything like that?
I do agree that like point in time is an issue, right? I do prefer approaches where even though it's retroactive, right? It's like when you're assessed, then when you get your attestation, it's for the past months, right? Which makes sense because you can't assess into the future. But I think it's already way better than you have 2 days, let's say, for an ISO audit, and then or week, and then they assess everything at this point. They might go back things like, let's say they want to check for your security awareness training stuff. They might check something that happened 3, 4, 5 months ago. But a lot of it is related to having the right policies in place, making sure people acknowledge XYZ things, and all these actions are point in time. And I think the massive blind spot we have is because it's point in time, then it's useful for sales. Like it helps you build relationship in the supply chain because then your potential buyer of your product, they trust you a bit more because you have that, and maybe they need it themselves, like to get all the suppliers certified. But as yourself to like assess your own security program, if you only use that, then you might lack a lot of the potential big red dots that are scattered across your environment that were completely not assessed. So
Well, and I see them as companions. ISO is about the management system, plan, do, check,
yeah,
act, risk assessment orientation. And then SOC 2 is more about beat up those specific controls over 12 months. Man, we could throw TSACs into the mix. So I've seen you done that, and I've done that too. And that's what a lot of people have done. But I think I look forward to ongoing conversations with you, talking shop on these matters. There is no generally accepted accounting principles, yet they all have pros and cons,
yeah,
and we're all operating in different constraints, and there's risks and opportunities. It's just, why aren't people more fired up about GRC? I guess it's because they want to be pen testers, but I'll we'll actually, I want to get your perception of that. Like, what are your thoughts on encouraging people to go into GRC? I mean, you did it, but if you're talking to someone about it as a profession or a place to find a calling, what do you say? Or what are some of the key points that you like about it that you encourage others to give it a try for those reasons?
Yeah, I would say like the first big reason for me is you speak to a lot more different people. I think in some specific security verticals, let's say AppSec, a big part of who you're going to speak to are developers, right? If you work in cloud security, you might mostly speak to the infrastructure team or the SREs. But if you're in GRC, you speak to all these people. You speak to devs, you speak to your internal AppSec, CloudSec, etc. But you also speak to HR. You're very close to legal. And I think, so of course, not a CISO, very far from being a CISO. But what I can say is like, a CISO is a business role as much as it is a security role. And I think the experience you gain in GRC is the closest you can get to getting very strong business acumen while being in security. And I think it's something that is often overlooked because we think of security practitioners as like those wizards that have like crazy skills in all verticals. But in practice, like I think GRC, because there's this like broad set of controls that span across all areas, it gives you the relevant breadth, and then you have to dig deeper to get into enough depth so you can make sense of the conversations and kind of dig deeper when it makes sense. But all of these things, I think there are a lot of the skill set that you need to get into security leadership. So yeah, that's a
Great
big
point.
point for me. Yeah.
Well, right. So, and then I think what's interesting there, so if you're highly technical, it's going to help you get a better business acumen. If you're not technical yet, you can start in with a business background and work on those skills. We need this convergence where both sides need to come together. Business people need a better technical acumen to understand the
Yeah.
underlying thing that is driving the business and what they need to protect. Technical people need to speak the language of business to get budget to become a CISO and to advance the mission of the company.
Mhm.
So those need to converge. Um, I think then that's an interesting segue into, I want to hear more about your story that I didn't get in your brief origin YouTube clip, eh? Like, so please, could you talk in a little bit more detail about your path of um, getting technical and how you did it and what you did? So you've said you did a bunch of online learning courses, but I mean, what other what else did you do? And then from that experience, what advice would you give others looking to do something similar?
Yeah. So I would say that like when I started learning more about security, I was trying to get like a fundamentals first approach. I was like, okay, so when you work in security, you're securing something. right? What is that thing, right? Instead of starting with like, let's try to become a pen tester, let's learn Wireshark or like Burp Suite or something like this. I was like, okay, what are the backbones of like an information system? So the first thing I did, I still remember, I watched a massive course. It was from CBT Nuggets, I think it was
Great
the
courses there. Yes, I've done those.
yeah. So I don't remember the name of the instructor. I think his name Keith. He's very well known actually, and it was a course on IPv4. And I watched. I think it was 15 hours, so it was very long. But he went through everything, and it was the audience were career changers. So like typical, like the right level of complexity for me. So I watched the whole session, and then after that, I went into like kind of books. So I started with very basic kind of CCNA book for still the networking part of things. And then I also did a book that was around, it was the foundation of information security. I think it's by No Starch Press, which is very good book publishing. They do tech books, but a lot of ones that are very catered to beginners. And then I did the CS50 course by Harvard online. So, and that was all about
Yeah,
like
I've heard of
software.
them. They might
Yeah.
be reputable.
So it's an online course that you can follow your own pace, and they're very focused on software. So it was more about understanding software, like how software is produced. There was a bit of Python, a bit of C. So I did some of that, just the basics once again. But because for me, like I didn't want proficiency, I wanted understanding. And the way I approach the learning is like I always try to tie it back to my day job. So let's say, like, for example, when I was at EY, I started working on like building a massive dashboard for a public sector customer of like the whole server stack and knowing which one were out of date, out of end of life support, etc. So
Awesome.
I heard like Red Hat and like Citrix and lots of names I've never heard of, AAX from IBM, etc. So then I went into like servers, and my goal was like to find like sometimes bite-sized videos, very short ones for specific topics, and then maybe something a bit more architectural. I remember like IBM has a great series of videos on whiteboards when they explain what Kubernetes is,
Seen
like
those?
what
Yes.
OpenShift. So I like these videos. There's a similar channel in French as well that I used back then, and it was good because it made me better at my job first. So then I could build upon this knowledge to build even more because I got validated for what I learned through like relationship with the customer, with my manager, etc. But then at the same time, it kind of piqued this interest, right? Then from servers, I went into cloud. I wanted to know, okay, but VMs and how this does this look? And I had some knowledge of how it was on-prem because that company was doing on-prem that then could make learning like EC2, for instance, a bit easier. So that's the way I approached it. I think it sticks more when it's directly correlated to your J job, just because there's ways for you to do this kind of repeated learning. But it's always also good if you want to move in specific area and it's not related right now to your day job, you still have to do it. I think you still have to get those skills because if you always wait for your job to give you that opportunity, it will happen sometimes, but not all the time. And if you're very driven and you want this, then you also have to do this kind of self-learning journey and have your own program like on the side, kind of.
Some great insights in there. I think the first thing I want to talk about is like you started with IP version 4 and you kept going. That's amazing. But I think the big strategic concept I'm hearing is that experiences are the most important of your career development plan. However, that's 70% of how to grow faster, according to Harvard. However, that 10% education unlocked opportunities for those experiences. So that's really cool. Now, what can you say about relationships? Did you do job shadowing, job rotation, mentoring, Discord servers, YouTube? Like any thoughts on where that fit into your path?
So let's say I think it can depends on the stage. I think when I was very young in my career, um, I think networking helped a lot more. Just because like I think it's very French specific or maybe like Southern Europe specific, but it's very tough to break into a field that is unrelated to your degree in France and potentially in most of Southern Europe. So for me, the way I got my first, so I did my first year in security was an apprenticeship. And the way I got that apprenticeship is through a friend of mine who was an alumni from the previous year of the school I was enrolled into. And I literally went into 15 different like networking events. I pinged everyone that
Good
was
for you,
breathing.
pounding the pavement.
Yeah, I went onto LinkedIn. I found back some of the messages of people who reached out to me now because of the podcast. And I reached out to them back in 2018 when I was trying to break into security looking
Wow.
for tips. It was very
Yeah.
funny. I saw the previous messages and I was checking some, at some point, I sent like 450 messages, like DMs directly on LinkedIn to people, like some partners at Big Four, people that worked in tech in GRC. And out of those 450, maybe like 15 answered. But some relationship is still going now. So it was built a long time ago. Some of them just a couple of tips that helped. But yeah, it took like from when I was determined to move into security to getting my apprenticeship secured, it took me 4 months. But during those 4 months, I was like every day, every single day, I was like, I have to get this. Like if I can get this first job, then I'll learn on the job. I won't have to like spend 10 hours a day on the side. I can also learn like through my day job. And I have that kind of resume building and stuff. So I was like, I have to make this work.
What a great example of how it's not easy, but it's possible.
Yeah.
And, your entrepreneurship and your drive to get it. It also reminds me like I ran into someone that I kind of admire as being ahead of me career-wise at a conference recently. And I said, "Hey, you were on that podcast and I thought it was really great." He said, "No, that's not me." And I guess and then, I went back to my LinkedIn, I went to my DMs, and like 3 years ago, I had sent him a note saying, "Hey, great podcast." And he was on it. He's just done so many since that he doesn't remember. But,
Interesting.
I think I was similar in terms of pounding the pavement to, um, you know, try to unlock opportunities. And I
Mm,
think, and okay, so that brings us to YouTube. So there's something that's really interesting in discovering you, right? So being a YouTuber, not for the faint of heart. And then you picked the niche of GRC, which is a very formidable challenge in an already challenging space. So are you like James Cameron, who shoots movies underwater because he enjoys doing something that no one else has done, and he just enjoys that it's harder? What led you to that? And yeah, but please tell us more about that story.
I don't know about James Cameron. I want to say it's to that level yet, especially the especially the production quality is not up to par. But I
Well,
would
you can
say
be underwater, decompressing upside down, watching the replay, and
yeah,
giving notes via microphone to the team working 24/7.
that
Right,
makes
right.
sense. No, I would say like for the podcast, the story stemmed from a coffee chat I had with Ashish that does the cloud security podcast. So he
Awesome. And he's doing the AI one now, which is also great.
yes, with Caleb as well. So he recently kind of recently moved to London from Australia, and I'm local, so I live in London as well. So we met up, and actually, like I was thinking of something like this, but it was very far in kind of into the future. And he said, like, you're sharing out on LinkedIn, you've been relatively active recently. He thinks like I think at this time Mark Graziano started his GRC podcast as well, and I was like, I don't know if it's the right timing. I don't know if it's like something that people would be interested. But he said like the kind of what you did in your LinkedIn course, focusing more on the technical aspects and how kind of the engineering practice can be infused into GRC, like is something where there's not a lot, and which was true back then, right? It was not a lot of people speaking about these topics.
Yes.
It's still niche to this day, I think. For good and bad reasons, but also I think there's good reasons why it's still niche. So I was thinking, I have no idea how to do this thing. Let's try it. Let's try to like find at least a first guest that would be willing to speak, and try to have like an interesting topic. What I thought challenging is like it could be pretty niche. So at the same time, you're speaking to kind of a smaller audience, maybe people that are a bit more experienced in the field because they have these pain points like more. It's more accurate, right? If you're a newcomer, you still don't know some of the issues around like how auditing perform, continuous monitoring, all these different topics. So I was like, I'm closing myself to the kind of newcomer audience, which is pretty massive because a lot of people in GRC are just starting out, just building their experience, especially people that are active on social media. But I was like, it's also a good way for me to preach this thing, right? It's also a good way for me to make it accessible. So these people, they go into the field with the right mindset and they understand how they can change the industry so it's closer to like, you know, the engineering counterparts and like closer to a true picture of how secure your environment is.
Dude, I would bet on the growth of your channel. I don't think that it is just for entry level. I think that this is an unserved, uncontested marketplace that you are bringing, you know, Gerald Dozier calls them knowledge bombs. I don't know what the right word is, but like really helpful wisdom and insights to elevate it and do it right if you're not, or do it better and strive to advance it. So, you know,
Thank you.
even if I'm, I'll be the president of a small fan club or a big fan club. I don't care, but you know, keep doing what you're doing, and it's really cool that, you know, we see the heavyweight security gurus recommending to start YouTube channels for networking reasons, for build skills on skills reasons, and just the opportunity for me to meet you today because of your YouTube channel and mine. I mean, that's pretty, pretty cool and exciting. So, not for the faint of heart, but I think you've enjoyed it, I've enjoyed it, and I'd recommend others to go for it.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
All right. Well, listen, I think I'll hit the last question now.
Mm-hmm.
It's loaded and biased, but I don't care. Why is GRC awesome and underrated?
Great question. Great question. I would say the reason why it's awesome is because I think now more and more, so that I'm trying to frame my answer the right way. So more and more now, environments for companies are getting a lot more complex, right? So they have, let's say they have infrastructure on-prem, they have things in the cloud, they have like potentially AI models now that are part of like the landscape of what they use to produce their services. They have so many SaaS vendors, potentially hundreds, potentially thousands that they use as well. So what you need more now that more than ever is a risk approach to managing your security program, because you can't do everything all at once because you have limited resources, limited budget, potentially unlimited like kind of attack surface, and it's expanding all the time. And I think where in GRC, especially the risk aspect can make a massive difference is you help prioritize the right programs, the right remediation work. And I think more and more now, if you just have expertise, but you can't kind of hierarchize the different things between what's the most important, what's the most critical, kind of the Eisenhower matrix kind of approach. If you can't do this, then you're going to spin your wheels and spending a lot of time on things that be less effective than something that would solve like, you know, something that would be more close to the root cause. And I think like that's where GRC is so critical because you have a lot more context than any other team. In this context, when you bring it to the table to each individual SME team, you help them so much. Because think about it, like if I'm AppSec, I'm trying to solve something around authentication, and then you come to me and you say like this thing in our CI pipeline, like this scanner, if you can fix this, you would allow hundreds of thousands of pipelines every month to run with proper security scanning in place. If they have this kind of additional knowledge and they focus on the right ticket item, they make this themselves look better to leadership, and also they solve like something that is a lot more critical to the business. And I think GRC, because of the bigger picture, they might have that knowledge, and if they can share it properly, and they have like the kind of they're almost like the deputy CISOs, right? They have this kind of hat of like we represent the interest of the company, of the security org as a whole, and you specifically, we can give you these information tidbits, and maybe you can use them to make like more informed decisions on what to prioritize. So I think it's a very hidden kind of good point when you work in GRC, which can really help you propel yourself to leadership, but also really help you like get the other teams to do the best job they can.
Right on, man. Well said. I think those are bringing some interesting and new points to the discussion based on your expertise and experience, and I'm inspired by them. So thank you for that. I'll be continuing to be a fan of your channel and your work, and I look forward to talking to you next time.
Thanks a lot for having me, and that was a great conversation.